Welcome to Time Traveling Team, the weekly podcast where we review every episode of Doctor Who right from the very beginning. I'm Tricia.
And I'm Paddy. This week we begin our journey with the Fifth Doctor as we join him and his companions in Castrovalva. As usual, we will be discussing the Doctor, the companions and the villains and giving our thoughts on the story as a whole.
We'd also love to hear your thoughts on the story, so to join the discussion you can check us out at Time Teamp, that's TIMETEAMP, on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram, or you can email us at timetravelingteam@teamproductions.com. Paddy, before you jump into the story recap, a couple of things.
Yep.
Yes, we know that this episode was delayed. Things came up. But also, it was only when I actually watched this episode last night that I realised that every time I have mentioned this episode, which has been a couple of times because it gets mentioned in other bits of trivia that I've spoken about before. Why did you never tell me I was saying it wrong?
Because see, I was having like a bit of a Mandela effect because I believed it was Castrovalva, but you kept saying Castrovalva with such confidence. I was like, maybe I'm wrong.
No, you were right. It is Castrovalva. There's two of us.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I had never fucking seen it. Why didn't you? It's like the Keeper of Traken that I was calling the Keeper of Traken in every single trivia spot. You never fucking corrected me in that one either.
No, because to be fair, I kept also calling it the Keeper of Traken. It wasn't until we actually watched it that I was like, oh wait, they call it Traken. Yeah.
So for everyone who's been sort of listening to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to and been going, it's Castrovalva, you trash, it's Castrovalva, you whatever. I'm aware of that now. Yeah. And I won't say it wrong again until I do, but I won't. But yeah, weird side note aside, I think we can move on to the story summary, please. So, Paddy,
Perfect.
Peter Davison, first story, Castrovalva. Go.
I will. Part 1. At the Faris Research Centre, Adric, Tegan and Nyssa rush the newly regenerated Doctor back to the TARDIS, all the while being pursued by a group of security guards. However, the Doctor collapses in his weakened state and the security guards catch up to the group and apprehend him as an ambulance arrives. The paramedics go to attend to the Doctor and Tegan notices that they have left the keys in the ignition. Adric distracts the guards by saying that he is an alien and Tegan and Nyssa drive off in the ambulance after the Doctor is put on board by the paramedics. Nyssa tells Adric to run, but he doesn't get far before he is caught by the guards. Nyssa and Tegan rush into the TARDIS with the Doctor as the paramedics and the guards chase after them. Once on board, the Doctor rushes down one of the corridors. Tegan goes after him whilst Nyssa watches Adric on the external view screen. Nyssa calls Tegan back as she sees the Master's TARDIS materialise. They watch as it emits a burst of energy that stuns all the guards but leaves Adric seemingly unharmed. The Master's TARDIS dematerialises again, and they go and bring Adric back inside, who immediately pilots the TARDIS away. Once they are in flight, Tegan tells him that the Doctor is acting odd and is looking for something called the Zero Room. Adric perks up at this and says he will go help the Doctor. He finds his coat abandoned but notices a long thread running down one of the corridors. He soon finds the Doctor unravelling his scarf so he can track his progress. They continue on down the corridor and the Doctor explains what a Zero Room is, stating that it is a negative energy space designed for healing. He mentions that Romana always suggested he go there for a break, but he becomes sad when Adric reminds him that she is gone. He comments that the regeneration process isn't running as smoothly as it should, and suggests that maybe something in the TARDIS is impeding it. Back in the console room, Tegan grows increasingly anxious with the length of time that the Doctor and Adric have been gone. Nyssa says that they can't do anything for them in the console room and suggests that they go look for them. Tegan is apprehensive as she tells Nyssa about how she got lost in the maze-like corridors when she first arrived in the TARDIS, but she gains new determination when Nyssa suggests that she stay behind. Just as they leave, Tegan notices a screen on the console that shows it has the full repository about everything to do with the TARDIS, and they begin to use it. After some trial and error on how to use the files, they try to find out how to pilot it, but see that there is already a flight plan programmed. They decide to go look for the Doctor and Adric and find the trail. Back in the corridors, the Doctor, having run out of thread from his scarf, is tearing up his clothes to leave a trail. Adric watches as the Doctor begins to behave as he did in his previous incarnations. Adric suddenly disappears when the Doctor goes into a state of panic as he relives a memory from his second incarnation. The Doctor takes off after Adric, coming across a mirror where he scrutinizes his new appearance. He then notices a cricket bat and decides to varnish it. He looks around and finds a room nearby which resembles a cricket club changing room. A few moments later, the Doctor emerges wearing a cricket sweater and striped pants. He goes back to the mirror and finds a beige and orange trimmed coat waiting for him to complete his new ensemble. He then hears a door slam and he goes to investigate it, believing it to be the entrance to the Zero Room. He encounters Tegan and Nyssa and they go looking for the room together. The Doctor has another bout of delirium, but Nyssa says that she has found the Zero Room and Tegan helps the Doctor inside it. Inside the room, the Doctor becomes tranquil and says that he will need to stay in the room until his post-regeneration haze is finished. Nyssa comments that there isn't a bed to help his recuperation, but the Doctor says that he doesn't need one as he concentrates and then hovers in the air before rotating so that he is lying flat whilst suspended. He then tells him that he needs them all to work together whilst he goes through the healing process. He tells him that Adric will be in charge due to him having spent longer with the Doctor. Tegan and Nyssa wonder where he is, and suddenly an image of Adric bound in a web appears before them. He reveals that the Master hypnotized him and forced him to preset the coordinates in the TARDIS. They ask where he is now, but he reveals that he is actually a facsimile, created by the Master using the block transfer computational skills Adric garnered on Logopolis. The vision then fades, and Nyssa tells Tegan to keep an eye on the Doctor while she goes to try and release the navigational controls. As she makes her way back to the console room, she notices that the lipstick marks that Tegan had earlier used to help guide their progress have begun to run as if they are melting from the walls. The cloister bell then sounds, which is heard by the Doctor and Tegan in the Zero Room. The Doctor asks where Adric is, but Tegan doesn't tell him, fearing that knowing the Master is involved might affect his healing. She tells him to wait in the Zero Room while she goes to find Nyssa. She arrives back in the console room, noticing that it is getting increasingly hotter. Once there, Nyssa reveals that the preset coordinates are taking them back to the dawn of the universe, where the TARDIS will be destroyed in the Big Bang. Suddenly, the Master and the real Adric appear on the external view screen, with the Master laughing as he waves goodbye to them. Part 2. Nyssa expresses her loathing for the Master and turns off the view screen, telling Tegan that there is nothing that they can do. Tegan refuses to accept this and says that there must be something in the TARDIS databanks that can help them. Meanwhile, the Doctor emerges from the Zero Room, but falls in his weakened state. In an effort to help him, the TARDIS sends him a motorized wheelchair in order to get him back to the console room. He arrives there to find Tegan and Nyssa struggling to find a way to reverse the TARDIS's course, but finding it difficult due to the gravitational pull caused by the Big Bang. The Doctor tells him that the situation has caused an adrenaline surge through his body, which is helping him think clearly. He tells Nyssa that he will guide her on how to operate the manual override system. Unbeknownst to them, they are being observed by the Master and the imprisoned Adric, who vows to get free. Back on the TARDIS, as Nyssa overrides the temperature regulation system, the Doctor tells Tegan how to delete rooms within the TARDIS in order to jettison enough excess weight that will prevent the ship from escaping the gravitational pull. He tells him that he and Adric had to do it before, and again asks where he is. Reluctantly, Nyssa begins to tell him what happened, but he says that they can tell him later as time is running out. Suddenly he starts to revert to mannerisms from his third incarnation, and Nyssa tells Tegan that the adrenaline surge is wearing off due to the decrease in temperature. He goes back to the wheelchair and says that they need to jettison 25% of the inner architecture of the TARDIS to build up enough trust to get away. They ask him how to ensure that they don't jettison any important rooms, but he tells them to ask K9 before passing out. With no other choice, Tegan and Nyssa prepare to jettison the required amount of space from the TARDIS, with Nyssa doing her best to reassure an anxious Tegan that everything will be alright. Meanwhile, the Master offers to release Adric from the web if he joins him willingly, otherwise he will stay there for eternity. Reluctantly, Adric agrees to help him, and they suddenly watch as the Doctor's TARDIS disappears in a blinding flash of light. The Master rejoices in his victory, but is wary of Adric's lack of resistance in joining him or the remorse for his friend's passing. He demands that Adric reveal what he is hiding and forces him to manifest, via block transfer computation, another vision, this time showing the Doctor's TARDIS successfully escaping the Big Bang. Back on the Doctor's TARDIS, Tegan finds an entry in the databank saying that in times of regeneration crisis, where the Zero Room is compromised, Time Lords have gone to planets free from advanced technology with atmospheres that resemble the energy of the Zero Room. They set course for one of the locations suggested, a place called Castrovalva, and then Nyssa wheels the Doctor back to the Zero Room. She tells him that Tegan is studying the flight manuals and how to pilot the TARDIS, and the Doctor expresses doubt at her ability to fly it. Suddenly the ship lurches to the side before righting itself again. They arrive at the Zero Room, but the Doctor is horrified to see that it has been jettisoned. He gives Nyssa his sonic screwdriver to take the hinges off the doors, but he passes out when she asks what the point is. Suddenly the TARDIS tilts to its side again as it lands sideways on a grassy hill. The Doctor suddenly wakes up again and tells Nyssa that they can craft an ad hoc Zero Room out of the space the previous one occupied. Well, under his instructions, she removes the doors and they take it to the console room, where they remove some components from the walls. She then crafts a coffin-like isolation pod. Tegan comes in, having gone outside to scout her surroundings, and says that she has seen a settlement less than a day's walk away. Together, they carry the pod outside, which is easier to maneuver as the Doctor's weight is cancelled out via the negative room energy within it. They place it on the wheelchair and roll it towards the settlement. However, when they stop to get their bearings, the wheelchair falls into a river, as does Nyssa when she goes to retrieve it. Tegan helps her to get it out, but they see that it is heavily damaged from the fall. With no other choice, they carry on foot, carrying the pod between them, which has started to grow heavier. Suddenly, Tegan points out the settlement that she says is Castrovalva, which is actually a fortress on top of a cliff. Nyssa covers the pod in foliage, while she and Tegan go to find help. After they leave, two masked, fur-clad figures appear and say that the Murgrave must be informed of the strangers' arrivals. A while later, Tegan and Nyssa return to find blood on the ground and the Doctor missing. Part 3. Nyssa says that the cabinet was opened from the inside and therefore the Doctor might be better. Tegan says that they need to go find him and they head back towards Castrovalva. En route, they are suddenly ambushed by a large group of the masked figures and Tegan says to run. They manage to evade their pursuers and Nyssa says they need to find the Doctor to make sure that his regeneration cycle is finished. Elsewhere, the Doctor is lying on the ground, listening to the vibrations of the masked war party's movements in the distance. He starts to make his way up the cliff where Castrovalva is stationed, but as he goes, he gets a case of vertigo. He hears Nyssa calling him in the distance, and he seems not to recognize his title. He manages to get towards the top of the cliff and sees a group of the masked figures laughing as they go through an entrance in the rock face. He is suddenly captured by others and they demand to know who he is, but he says that he isn't sure. A horn is sounded in the distance and he is brought inside the entrance, which seals over. A few moments later, Tegan and Nyssa arrive, having followed another war party that brought the pod to Castrovalva, but failed to get into the entrance before it seals over. Inside, the Doctor is brought into a grand hall where other more well-dressed people are going about their business. The masked figures commend each other on the success of their hunt, but they are good-naturedly mocked by the arrival of another man, whom they address as Shardovan. Shardovan addresses Murgrave, who is the leader of the war party, and asks about the Doctor. Murgrave says that they should inform the Portreeve of the Doctor's arrival, but Shardovan says that he is already aware of it, and instead asks the Doctor why he is there. The Doctor says that he doesn't know, and Shardovan mistakes his amnesia as a metaphor for wanderlust. Shardovan says that he is the chief librarian of Castrovalva, which amazes the Doctor as he assumed from the Murgrave and the others that they were a more tribal society. Murgrave and the rest of the war party remove their masks and furs and begin to speak in a more refined manner. Murgrave's adjutant, Ruther, calls for food and tells the Doctor that they will give him a room after he is eaten. Outside, Tegan and Nyssa continue to scale the cliff face to try and find another way into Castrovalva. Shardovan and Ruther lead the Doctor through Castrovalva, explaining to him that the clothing they wore was part of the ritual hunt that Murgrave devised for the people in order to break the monotony of their scholarly life. Shardovan explains that he wasn't at the hunt due to the fact that all the armour, which are relics from their ancestors, doesn't fit him due to his height. The Doctor jokes that this is why he makes such a good librarian, as he can reach the high bookshelves. They meet Murgrave, who has prepared some medicine for the Doctor. The Doctor then asks if he is the Doctor that he has heard people looking for, but the others say that he must be referring to the Portreeve, who fulfills the role of magistrate of Castrovalva. They then leave, and the Doctor examines the medicine Murgrave gave him. Suddenly, an old man appears and says that it is safe to drink. He introduces himself as the Portreeve. He tells the Doctor he will feel better in the morning and that he will join him and the others for breakfast tomorrow, where they will help the Doctor find what he seeks. He then bids the Doctor good night and he leaves him to get rest. After he goes, the Doctor notices that the Portreeve addressed him as Doctor. The Portreeve goes to the Grand Hall and observes Murgrave telling Shardovan that they have discovered Tegan and Nyssa as they were scaling the cliff and have brought them inside. They demand to see the Doctor, revealing that he is who they encountered earlier. Shardovan orders them to be taken to some rooms, but they will not inform the Portreeve until the morning. However, the Portreeve makes his presence known, much to Shardovan's chagrin. En route to their rooms, Tegan and Nissa are shown to the doctor, who is sound asleep, and they resolve to tell him about Adric in the morning. After they leave, Adric appears in the doctor's room. The next morning, Nissa goes for a walk in the Grand Hall whilst Tegan is asleep, and she notices the pod being carried by two Castrovalvans. She stops them and has them bring it to the doctor's room. She finds him still asleep and prepares to leave after the Castrovalvans, but she stops when she sees Adric in a nearby mirror. He tells Nissa that the Master is in Castrovalva, and he says that she needs to protect the Doctor until his regeneration cycle is complete. He warns her against telling anyone that he spoke to her, for fear that the Master will find out. Adric's reflection then vanishes as the Doctor wakes up, saying that he started to feel like his old self again, or rather his new self. On the Master's TARDIS, Adric painfully begs the Master to stop using his block transfer abilities to create fake versions of himself. However, the Master rejoices in the fact that his plans can proceed without interference from the Doctor and his companions. Later, the Doctor, Tegan and Nissa join the Portrait for breakfast at his home, where the Doctor thanks him for his help and his hospitality. Shardavan arrives with a stack of books that the Portrait requested. Nissa and Tegan express interest in seeing the library, and the Portrait tells Shardavan to show them whilst he shows the Doctor something else. He shows him a tapestry that can replay recent events, and they watch Nissa and Tegan's earlier journey to Castrovalva, carrying the pod between them. The Doctor commends them for their aid, but then realizes that he can't remember Adric's name, even though he is sure that he was present as well. He wanders through the Grand Hall, repeating the numbers 1 and 2, and he is overheard by a small girl who helps him continue counting past them. He comments that she should have a badge for mathematical excellence, and this triggers his memory of Adric. At the library, Nissa and Tegan find no technical books and instead bring a series of history books back to the Doctor's room to study them. A short while after they arrive, the Doctor bursts in and asks what happened to Adric. Tegan rebukes Nissa for telling him, but Nissa accidentally remarks that she promised Adric she wouldn't say anything. The Doctor gently asks her to reveal everything. The Doctor says it is time that they left, and he leads them back to the TARDIS. Nissa says that he may get sick again if they leave too soon, but he says they will just have to risk it. As they make their way through the corridors, they find themselves repeatedly entering the Grand Hall again. They soon find themselves being blocked by Shardavan, Murgrave, and Rooter. The Doctor starts to grow weaker again, and Nissa and Tegan help him back to his room. Once there, they find the pod missing. The Doctor looks outside and sees a series of interconnecting versions of the Grand Hall, with people disappearing in and out of them. He says that someone is manipulating Castrovalva and has caught them in a space-time trap. Part 4. The Doctor clutches his head in pain, but says that he is alright when Nissa and Tegan rush to his side. He tells them that they need to find the pod immediately, but he is too weak to go with them, leading Nissa to say the Portrait might be able to help. The two girls then leave him and run into Rooter, whom they ask to take them to the Portrait's house. As they keep going around in a loop, Rooter seems not to find anything unusual about what's going on. He then gets distracted by a telescope and says that the views are quite remarkable. Nissa and Tegan both take a turn and they see the pod being used by a group of washerwomen. Meanwhile, back in his room, the Doctor takes one of the stacks of books that Nissa and Tegan brought back from the library. He opens one and finds a piece of paper in it, which he immediately hides when he hears someone approaching. Murgrave enters, and the Doctor asks him to get the remaining books of the set that he is reading from the library. Murgrave returns a few moments later, and whilst the Doctor reads, he takes a look at the mirror the Doctor had placed in the window facing outwards. The Doctor asks him not to move it, saying the silver in its rear panel is helping keep his mind clear. He then asks him what he sees outside, and Murgrave casually gives a description of the area, saying that it is all normal. He says that Shardavan also asks such strange questions as he hands him a glass of medicine. The Doctor, uneasy with everything that is going on around him, asks how he can trust him, and Murgrave responds in looping sentences that he is trustworthy. The Doctor then asks him to draw a map of Castrovalva. When the diagram is finished, the Doctor asks Murgrave to show where his pharmacy is, and Murgrave is shocked as he realizes that he has drawn it on each side of the map. Just then, Nissa, Tegan, and Rooter return with the pod. Tegan says that they met Shardavan, and she states her belief that there is a conspiracy at play. The Doctor says that the Castrovalvans are just as ensnared as they are, as he asks Rooter to show where the Portrait's house is on the map. Rooter is also shocked when he draws the house in 4 different locations on the map. The Doctor then says that the books on the history of Castrovalva have all been made up. Tegan suggests that Shardovan must be behind it. Murgrave then hears a commotion coming from outside, and he goes there to tell everyone to keep quiet whilst the doctor is in recovery. Meanwhile, Ruther takes a look at the note the doctor found, and he says the handwriting belongs to Shardovan. The doctor says that he needs to see the Portreeve, but Murgrave says that he is still too weak. However, Tegan says that they can carry him whilst he is in the pod. She goes outside with Murgrave and Ruther to explain what's going on. She then goes back inside and emerges a few moments later carrying the pod with Nyssa. They are confronted by Shardovan, who insists on helping to carry the pod. After a while, Tegan insists that she is in charge of the doctor's care, and Shardovan lets the procession go. He then sees someone summoning him around the corner, and he is shocked to discover that it is the doctor, who placed all the books from the library into the pod as a decoy. The doctor confronts him about the note he wrote, which has annotations questioning the validity of the history written in the books. The doctor says Shardovan's intelligence was rebelling against something that is happening in Castrovalva. They attempt to go to the Portreeve's house, but get caught in the loop. Shardovan says that he cannot physically see the anomaly, but he is intuitive towards it and says he knows another route to take. Meanwhile, the others arrive at the Portreeve's house and ask him to help. However, the Portreeve reveals himself to be the master in disguise. He reveals that Castrovalva is a creation of his, made real via Adric's block transfer computational abilities, and he has brainwashed Adric into entering the information in the TARDIS databanks as well. The Master then attempts to destroy the pod with his tissue compressor. Tegan and Nyssa then notice the doctor attempting to climb into the room via a rear window through a vision displayed on the tapestry and try to distract the Master. However, he hears the glass shattering as the doctor breaks the window, and he orders Murgrave and Ruther to investigate. He then demands that Nyssa help him destroy the pod, but she says that it can only be destroyed from the inside. Murgrave and Ruther encounter the doctor and Shardovan. The doctor begs them to help stop the Master, telling them of his evil nature, and Shardovan backs him up, saying that they had also expressed doubts about the Portreeve before. They return back to the Master, who is attempting to pry open the pod with a fire poker. They relay what the doctor told them, and the Master sees an image of the doctor on the tapestry, but insists it is a trick, and he continues his assault on the pod. The pod falls to the floor and breaks apart and reveals the deception. The tapestry then fades away to reveal Adric still ensnared in the web. The doctor rushes in and confronts the Master, telling the others to stay back. The Master says that anyone that attempts to free Adric will die, as the webs holding him are lethal to the touch. Ruther suddenly attempts to attack him, but the Master... Ruther suddenly attempts to attack the Master, but he disappears, having been deleted by the Master. He then notices Shardovan in the upper gallery, preparing to swing from a chandelier. The Master tells him that the web is the only thing keeping Castrovalva intact, but Shardovan says that he has no power over the Castrovalvan's free will, and he launches himself into the web. Oh, fuck it. The Master tells him that the web is the only thing keeping Castrovalva intact, but Shardovan says that he has no power over the Castrovalvan's free will, and he launches himself into the web, destroying both it and himself, but also freeing Adric. The Doctor rushes forward to help his young friend as the Master flees into the fireplace, which is actually his TARDIS. The Doctor says they need to escape Castrovalva quickly, as it will soon begin to fold in on itself. They ask Murgrave to help lead them out. However, they eventually come to a halt as Murgrave is unable to decipher the loop. They spot the Master's TARDIS, and the Doctor says that it must have been caught in the space folding in on itself. Adric then says that he can navigate a way out, as he was the one who created Castrovalva. They follow his lead as he takes them out as the air is filled with the screams of the terrified Castrovalvans. Suddenly, the Master appears, and Murgrave tells the Doctor and the others to go as he sacrifices himself to hold the renegade Time Lord at bay. More Castrovalvans appear to help stop their creator's escape, and Adric and Tegan drag the Doctor away as he refuses to leave the Murgrave behind. The TARDIS crew manage to escape just as Castrovalva completely disappears. They return to the lopsided TARDIS, and the Doctor, now sporting a stalk of celery on his lapel, asks how it got that way. Tegan proudly says that she flew it following the instructions on the databank. The Doctor reveals that no such instructions exist, and it must have been created by a brainwashed Adric to cover up the preset flight coordinates, as the Master couldn't risk them not getting to Castrovalva. They then climb into the TARDIS, and Nyssa asks the Doctor if he's up to flying the ship, and he smiles as he says he feels completely splendid. End of the story. So once again, we are treated to the spectacle that is block transfer computation, questioning our reality as it is. But as always, the one place that is definitely real, or so I've been told, is the trivia spot. So what have you got for us this week?
Cool. So the air date for this, which is Peter Davison's first story, the first story of season 19, is the 4th to the 12th of January 1982. The writer is Christopher Bidmead, who we're familiar with from his script editor work. This is the second writing credit because he also wrote Logopolis. And we'll see his work one more time in Frontios. I'm going to question how I say everything now. We're going to go Frontios. Yeah. The director of this story is Fiona Cumming. This is the first of 4 directing credits for Fiona. We'll see her work again in Snake Dance, Enlightenment, and Planet of Fire. She has actually worked with pretty much all the previous Doctors because she was an occasional floor manager and production assistant during the 60s and 70s on the show. And then she came back to direct. Fiona sadly passed away in 2015.
Oh.
Christopher's original outline was called The Visitor, but his full scripts weren't. This was just, something they had to have on it. I think he mentioned in the special features that it was actually Jonathan Turner who called it The Visitor. After he actually sold the pitch, the story was commissioned, and after that was referred to as Castrovalva. The shot used in the story for Castrovalva itself, sitting on a cliffside, the name of the settlement of Castrovalva, obviously the episode title, and a couple of other things in terms of the way Castrovalva operates, are inspired by the artwork of M.C. Escher. So there's an M.C. Escher painting or print or whatever called Castrovalva, which is a city on a rock face. And so that's where he got the name and the idea of where it is. And obviously, as you're watching the episode, there's a lot of up is down and back and forth, infinity things, which work really well with the idea of block transfer, the idea of a TARDIS and whatever. It works really well. One thing that's hilariously funny when you're watching, particularly the special features on the Blu-ray, I don't know if one of these, I don't think these is available in the special features on the DVD. So the special features in the Blu-ray, you've got the behind the sofa sequence, which is Blu-ray exclusive, and then there's also the sort of making of documentary, where future Doctor Who actor, the guy who plays Turlough, whose name I've forgotten.
Mark. I'll check there now.
Yeah, so he did actually the behind the sofa. He was with Sophie Aldred, and then you had the other 4 together, which I thought was really cool. I sent Paddy a picture of it last night. But in the making of, he took the main 4 on a trip around like the shooting locations and stuff. But go on, you found his name. What is it?
Mark Strickson plays Turlough.
Yeah. So the final scene, where they jog up and then they stop by the tree and then whatever. There was a comment that was made in the behind the sofa where, like, literally as soon as that scene starts, Janet and Sarah and Peter, they just start taking the piss out of Matthew Waterhouse. And similarly, in the documentary, they explain why they were taking the piss out of Matthew Waterhouse. Basically, the night before, they had been down the pub, and Janet had discovered Campari and something was an alcoholic beverage, and so she decided, because Matthew had recently turned drinking age and whatever, sure, she'd buy him a few. Your man was hungover to fuck. Like, he was meant to look a bit pallid because he was recovering from the effects of his imprisonment, but like, apparently he was horrendous. The scene where like they stop by the tree and there's like a 2-shot then of like the Doctor and Tegan talking. Apparently they had to redo that at least once, because when they went to the 2-shot, Matthew disappeared behind the tree to throw up.
Classy.
And then when they were doing the ending shot, they were slightly afraid that they would all have to get into the TARDIS prop. with Matthew feeling really unwell and potentially about to throw up again.
Jesus Christ.
But it's so funny because on the behind the sofa segment, and this is where like I sent Paddy a picture as soon as I saw the four of them were doing it together. I was like, oh, this should make the behind the sofas really interesting. And I don't watch all of them, but I think I will for this because I think it's interesting getting the four of them together. But like the other three just take the piss out of him completely, and he's there like trying to blame Janet for buying it for him, and it's just so funny. There is a scene in the episode in Castrovalva where the doctor eats a piece of celery. You know, people who follow the Fifth Doctor were aware of the celery decoration, shall we say? The Johnson clothes. If you notice, it cuts really quickly. So he bites it and then it cuts straight away. The reason is he spat it out straight away because he hates celery.
Yeah, I don't blame him. I'm not a particular fan of it either.
Yeah. During part 2 of the story, you'll notice that Nissa's costume gradually transforms from the outfit that she was wearing from Traken and then into Logopolis at the start of the story. She changes into pants and then she loses her like fluffy thing. I have a theory as to why this was done, which is that this was not the first story they filmed. This was actually, I think, the fourth story they filmed, or the third story they filmed. So again, and we've seen this in previous stories, we saw it in Genesis of the Daleks, for example, where randomly in the middle of it, Sarah Jane found like some camo pants in a cupboard and decided to change her clothes. So it's a similar type of thing here. I think they had to sort of match her outfit for the next story, because it's interesting because Tegan doesn't change her clothes. So all that like rock climbing and all that kind of stuff they had to do and all that walking, poor Janet Fielding was having to do in a really tight skirt and heels, which is a bit awkward. So she changes pants before she leaves the TARDIS. She abandons her jacket after the whole thing with the river. And then she loses her hair comb. It gets caught by a tree branch. And that's it. That's her track and clothes gone. In the screenplay for part 2, Tegan was meant to drink from the stream while Nissa attempted to repair the wheelchair. That was dropped from shooting over fears that younger children might imitate it. You know, you never know if drinking water is fresh or if water in a stream is safe for drinking. And also in the making of, Janet Fielding said that she refused to shoot it anyway because her father is a parasitologist, and she knew full well what could have been in that water. She did not hope it would have done it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, and we may get this into this in our discussion, is the Doctor at several points during episodes 1 and part of episode 2 kind of does little impersonations of his previous selves. And the decision to do that was made during rehearsal when Piers Davison presented doing these personas as part of preparation for doing the role. It's like he was working his way through the stories as part of his preparation. And so they decided, this would work really, really well. As the Doctor sort of, at one point, he's sort of grabbing his thing and speaking like Bill, and he was doing the bit with the recorder and all that kind of stuff. So it was really good. Interesting things, like I mentioned, this wasn't the first one shot of the season. What was also really interesting was what they did with the, I suppose you'd say, the reprise from Logopolis, right?
Yeah.
Because there's two things. One, cold open, which was weird. It was just there. It just started.
Yeah.
They hadn't done a pre-credits scene like that before. I just don't think they have. Or hadn't done for ages. But the thing is that you would think that would have just been. Yeah, no, this is the first one.
Yeah,
I knew
because I was going through, because like when Patrick Troughton took over the role, they were still doing the slightly serialized format. Plus, that was in the middle of a season. Then obviously they could have started from scratch with John because he never appeared at the Generation, and then when Tom took over, there was no cold open. They just went straight into the new story sequence.
Yeah, so it's the first one to have a cold open, but you would think that, similar to how they did for. So if you think all the way back to when we talked about Robot, which was our proper on-screen regeneration, so from Planet of Spiders into Robot, they went straight from filming Planet of the Spiders into filming Robot.
Yeah.
So it was that one. So the scene at the end of Planet of the Spiders is the same as the scene from the beginning of Robot. That's not what they did here. As opposed to reusing the footage from the end of Logopolis, they reshot it. Tom came back, lay down on the floor, and redid that whole bit. Which is why if you compare the two scenes back to back, so the ending from Logopolis and the regeneration scene, or the scene from Castrovalva, they look slightly different. They're very good, but they are slightly different. So there's a couple of little things that are documented as production errors, but actually it's just because they did it again, which is so weird. And Tom isn't credited for it, so he just came back and lay down and did the thing again.
It kind of reminds you of the first two Back to the Future movies, because they reshot the end of the first one, which is the start of the second one, but with a new actress.
Yeah. So we have a new opening title sequence. So we're sticking with stars, which I still don't like. I'm not going to lie. I know that people love it. I don't like it. But this time it has Peter Davison's face as opposed to Tom's. I will say Peter looks happier than Tom did.
Yes. Yeah.
One of the things that people sort of call out as a production error in this is the fact that the Fifth Doctor isn't wearing the same shoes as his predecessor.
Yeah.
And that isn't without precedent, because obviously he regenerates and he's wearing the same clothes, and him not wearing the same shoes isn't without precedent. We talked about it way back when, that the Second Doctor apparently regenerated parts of his clothing.
Yeah, his pants.
Yeah, which didn't make sense. There's no scene in that story where he changes clothes. And the First Doctor's clothes apparently regenerated with him. Similarly, the Fourth Doctor has different shoes and a different jacket from what the Third had. The difference in Castrovalva is that the production team admitted they simply made a mistake. They weren't trying to say that there was anything to do with the regeneration. They just legit fucked up and got the wrong shoes. Which I love, because at the time of recording this, it's currently October 2023. The 60th is right around the corner. And so, a year ago, we had Jodie Whittaker's regeneration into David Tennant. And one of the things that fucking irked me to hell was their clothes regenerated.
Yep.
Which made no sense. So just for anyone out there who didn't want to see David in Jodie's clothes, which, are you insane? I wanted to see that. And who tried to cite changing shoes as an example of this, at least in this instance, the production team admitted it. They fucked up.
I remember hearing a story just in relation to the Jodie and David thing, was that I think there was theories going around that there's obviously something up with this regeneration, hence the clothing pattern looks very kind of reminiscent of Sacha Dhawan's Masters gear. But I think what was it? I think Russell T Davies came out and said that he didn't want to add any ammunition to the toxic side of the internet of having the David appear in Jodie's outfit. Which is kind of strange because Sacha Dhawan appeared in it in Jodie's last episode.
Yeah,
it's a variation of it.
I call bullshit on that.
Yeah.
I I really do. Like, I think if anything, not having him wear the outfit would be what those people wanted.
Yeah.
Because it's removing any trace of Jodie's character from him.
Mm-hmm.
But that we will talk about that.
Yes.
Many moons from now.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thing about this story, so for this story, the series was shifted from its traditional Saturday early evening transmission to a twice a week, Monday and Tuesday transmission. But this wasn't really well promoted, and so as a result, many regular viewers missed part 2. So in some cases, like, it also went out at different times. So some people saw it as early as mid-afternoon, as opposed to like the tea time, 6:30, normal time, which is a weird choice to make. Although it is a transmission schedule, not the exact days, but the styling that CBBC would use for the Sarah Jane Adventures when that show came out.
Yep.
As of the story, Doctor Who now has 3 companions again.
Mm-hmm.
The writers admitted they weren't a big fan of having 3, because they would constantly have to come up with a way to have one of the 3 incapacitated. They found it very hard to write stories for 3. Stories for 2 were doable, stories for 1 is best. Was kind of their feeling on it, and everyone kind of agreed that it was a bit cluttered. And on the DVD special features, a lot of different talk around like whose idea was it. With people saying that John Nathan Turner did it because he was afraid that like people wouldn't tune in, and so if you introduce more companions, there's more carryover. So like, oh yeah, we have a new Doctor, but like Adric is still here, and remember Nissa, she's still here, and Tegan, who we introduced last time, she's still here, and no one really gave a concrete reason as to why they had 3, but most of them kind of agreed that 3 was too many. And I think the difference between 3 in this versus the original 3, because bearing in mind Susan, Barbara, Ian, Barbara,
Polly,
Ian,
Ben.
Vicky, Polly, Ben, and Jamie, like 3 has been done before, but it hasn't been seen, if you exclude K9, which we don't, but most people would. It hasn't been seen since Ben and Polly.
Yeah.
And the difference was, like, back in the day, particularly with, Susan, Ian, and Barbara, and Susan, Vicky, and Barbara, was that people would take a story off. They'd take several weeks off of work. It was their holidays. Whereas they don't seem to be doing that now, like, through the 70s and into the 80s.
Yeah.
So it's a different filming thing. So not only do you have to find a reason for the other person to not be there, but you have to keep cutting back to them and have scenes with them to, make it work. But anyway, so we'll see how the season goes. But that's interesting that like no one seemed particularly fond of the crowded TARDIS, as they were referring to it. This is the first story to have the Doctor simply credited as the Doctor, rather than Doctor Who in the credits. And that's the way it remained, except for Series 1 of the 2005 revival of the show. And the reason is that Peter Davison requested that he be credited as the Doctor, rather than the traditional Doctor Who, because he felt it was incorrect in the context of the show's continuity, which is something I have argued forever. Like, you always hear, like, oh, particularly on the BBC, like, if you have you're someone going Graham Norton and think, oh, and you're the new Doctor Who, and I was like, oh, it's the new Doctor Who. It's like, Doctor Who is the name of the show. He's the Doctor. Like, that has been really well established by now. So he was like, I don't want to be credited as Doctor Who because that makes no fucking sense. Credit me as the character. And that's what they did. They held the Doctor as the credited title up until the 1996 movie. And then for Russell T Davies's era, the credit went back to Doctor Who again. So Christopher Eccleston was Doctor Who before David Tennant took on the role and once again requested that it go back to being the Doctor. Because he deemed Doctor Who as being incorrect.
No, I don't think it was because he deemed it was incorrect. I think he was trying to get in good with Peter Davison.
Either way, though,
Yeah.
the whole idea of like the Doctor being credited as the Doctor in the credits all goes back to Peter Davison. His doing. Lastly, before we go on to characters, the Portreeve is listed in the credits as being played by Neil Toynay, which is an anagram of Tony Ainley. This is a play on the Master's habit of using either anagrams or synonyms for the Master as his alias. And it was used, obviously, to prevent the reveal that the Portreeve was the Master. And actually, Fiona Cummings' husband came up with Neil Toynay as the alias. Interestingly, if you watch the Behind the Sofa, like I said, you've got the 4 TARDIS crew, and then you have Mark, you said?
Yeah, Mark.
And Sophie Aldred, who plays Ace, who will have a story with Anthony Ainley during her run. And literally they're getting down to the reveal and they're watching it. And at one point Mark's like, oh, I know who that is. And she's like, who? Who is it? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. And literally she realises it literally just before the effect fades away. And it's so funny to watch her face like be like, oh, holy shit. It was really good. Like, I love seeing those type of, because sadly I read some of the trivia before I watched the episode, so I kind of knew. I also kind of guessed it anyway because of the way the episode was running. But I always love those types of things where you get to see a real live reaction to a reveal. It's like back when Game of Thrones was on, and when Game of Thrones was good. And you had everyone posting people's reactions to the Red Wedding. Which was even funnier because obviously the Red Wedding was in the book.
Yeah. Actually, I saw something because I think that the 2 biggest media surges that happened during the pandemic were podcasts and also YouTube reaction channels. There's a huge fucking surge. And I come across every so often because I like to see if people are like, kind of classic, action, sci-fi, drama, all this kind of stuff, things that we would have grown up with. And it happened. And it's something that I love happening. Someone watched the original Planet of the Apes and did not know the twist at the end. And watching their face. Yeah, no,
How
seriously.
old was this person?
Probably in their early 20s.
Okay. They maybe
but no, I was like, I was like saying, like, I remember saying, like, to you, and I was saying to a few other people, that what is it, like, I think 3 of the biggest pop culture reveals that biggest reveals in cinema history that are just spoiled because of pop culture are Empire Strikes Back, Planet of the Apes, and Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
Because they're so ingrained.
Most of that has been spoiled by The Simpsons.
Yeah. Yeah. True. But yeah, like, it's just like one of those things that, like, I'd love, like, to go back and just never, like, and have that experience for the first time of, or even as a thing, because as a kid I watched the second one first. I watched Terminator 2 before I ever saw Terminator 1. But seeing people do it in chronological order, and in the initial showdown between Arnie and Robert Patrick, and not knowing which of them is the one that's been sent back to kill John.
Yeah. Actually, talking about reaction channels and stuff, I was talking to our friend Alan in work about reaction channels recently. It's really weird that you just mentioned them. We were talking the other day. And I do always, whenever people say about reaction channels, because that's what I said, some reaction channels aren't actually reaction channels. They're people watching programs, sitting there, saying nothing, doing nothing, not actually fucking reacting.
Yeah.
But one of the reaction channels that I do watch semi-regularly, depending on what she's watching, is Seska Says, which I mentioned way back when we were doing the first Doctor, because watching her reactions, specifically to Doctor Who, but with other things, but I still remember to this day her reaction to the end of The Chase. Because you have, like, they come down from the tower and she's sort of laughing at the fact that they've left fucking Stephen behind and whatever. And then she's sort of laughing, watching the scene. As she realizes what's happening, she's just like, bursts out bawling, crying, and she just sat on the couch holding herself, being like, "No, no, they can't be going, they can't be going." She was
Yeah.
bawling her eyes out. It is the most visceral reaction I've seen, or even heard of that someone had to a companion leaving. I will say, if you're a classic Doctor Who fan or a modern Doctor Who fan, I highly recommend her stuff because her videos are very good.
Yeah.
But back to our stuff.
Yes.
Listen to
Us.
listen to our stuff first, then go watch our stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about our cast. So as Shardaban, we have Derek Waring. This is his only Doctor Who acting credit. He's best known for playing Detective Inspector Goss in over 200 episodes of Z-Cars. So I think we can say he wins the Z-Car Grand Prize.
Yeah, absolutely.
His other non-Who credits include The Escape of RD7, Moody and Peg, and Somerset Mom Hour. Mom Hour?
I think it's Somerset Mom.
Mom Hour. Whatever. Derek passed away in 2007. As Murgrave, we have the wonderful Michael Sheard. This is the 5th of 6 appearances from Michael. We previously saw him in The Ark, The Mind of Evil, The Pyramids of Mars, and The Invisible Enemy, and we'll see him one final time in Remembrance of the Daleks.
I have been going back over his previous performances in my mind, and I remember saying like that Bernard Kay, I think, was my favourite guest actor on the show. But between Bernard Kay, Michael Sheard, and his name, it's gone from my head now, but mad scientist from Brain of Morbius.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Yep.
Yeah, the guy that plays him, I love seeing them in the show. And when I saw Michael Sheard, I was like, yay, it's gonna be another good one.
Yeah, I think with Michael Sheard, there's something about his voice that I just love. I hear his voice and I'm like, oh. And, I just love him. He's amazing. He's great.
I have to find that guy's name. It's gonna fucking bug me until I have it there now. 1 second. Philip Maddock.
Oh yeah. As Ruther, we have Frank Wiley, only Doctor Who acting credit for Frank. His non-Who credits include Rob Roy, The Three Princes, Fall of Eagles, Tales of the Unexpected, and Florence Nightingale. Frank passed away in 1994. Now, I mentioned last week a little bit about Janet Fielding, but let's talk a little bit more about her, as she, I think, has her first proper companion story this week. So Janet was born Janet Claire Mahoney on the 9th of September 1953, or could be Mahoney. I'm going to go with Mahoney, in Brisbane, in Queensland, Australia, which I find hilariously funny because at one point in this story, Tegan makes fun of Brisbane, which I wonder if they just did because that's where Janet's from. Before Doctor Who, she didn't actually have a lot of acting experience. She appeared in Hammer House of Horror, Shelley, and Minder. And again, in the Behind the Sofa, in the Doctor, they kind of talked that, outside of Doctor Who, Janet didn't really do much acting. She was still quite new to the business when she was doing Doctor Who, and she was still kind of learning, as she was going. Which, we'll talk more about her performance later on, but I didn't know that. I assumed she had done plenty of other things before. Interestingly, depending on what your interests are, in 1982, she married the Daily Mirror foreign editor Nicholas Davies, who later had allegations of being an arms dealer and a Mossad agent. They divorced in 1991.
Interesting.
Yeah. I guess she didn't do much acting after Doctor Who. Instead, she's been working as a theatrical agent, and she actually represented Paul McGann when he first took on the role of the Eighth Doctor. She's also been an outspoken advocate of greater women's participation in film and television, acting as an administrator for the pressure group Women in Film and Television. She has also returned to the character of Tegan in a large number of audio stories with Big Finish and some BBC ones. And fans of the revival era may recognise her from, first of all, her appearance in the 5-ish Doctors reboot, the sort of TV movie that was made around the 50th anniversary, where she played herself. But then most recently, she was in The Power of the Doctor, where she returned as Tegan on screen.
I think the only other trivia note I have for is the one that I said to you one day when we were out shopping, was that she worked as like I think as a casting agent for a while because she read opposite Sylvester McCoy in his auditions for Doctor Who.
Yeah. We also have a new doctor. So we're going to talk a little bit about Peter Davison, or Peter Malcolm Gordon Moffat, which is what he was born in 1951. He was sort of seen as being a big get to play the Doctor because he was really well known by this point for his role as Tristan Farnan in All Creatures Great and Small. Obviously, acting-wise, he goes by the name Davison. But there's a couple of interesting things because we've mentioned before there is a Doctor Who director named Peter Moffat. And so Peter Davison's friends thought that when there was episodes where Peter Davison was acting and Peter Moffat was directing, they thought he was doing both. Davison was the youngest actor to have played the Doctor in the series or in any BBC sanctioned production at the time that he took over the role. In 2010, he passed off that to Matt Smith. After his time on the show, Peter would go on to reprise the role in two Children in Need specials, one being Dimensions in Time, which we've mentioned a couple of times before, and also in Time Clash. He has also done a lot of Doctor Who audio dramas, novelizations, Big Finish productions, etc. since 1999. What I didn't know, right? Going back to Peter Moffat, oh, Peter, did you direct yourself? Right? Mm-hmm. The previously mentioned Five-ish Doctors reboot was written and directed and starred Peter Davison. So he actually wrote, directed, and starred it himself. For anyone who hasn't seen it, because I think it was one of those things that you sort of saw online, particularly if you lived outside the UK, you may not have seen it unless it was on like a DVD or whatever, or you looked up on YouTube. It was a comic film released on the BBC Red Button, which is like the BBC like extras thing. For the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, the Day of the Doctor, and it had Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, all kind of bemoaning the fact they weren't fucking in it, which I just think is brilliant. It's so good. After leaving Doctor Who, sorry, go on.
In the second volume of Space Helmet for a Cow, I read a thing, like it was a section on that, and like because they were saying like the Five-ish Doctors where like they had tried to get Tom, and Tom was very coy about it because he was basically under an NDA that he couldn't say anything about his appearance in the 50th. And they were like, kind of going, he's being a bit prick about this, isn't he? And then like when they actually go, oh wait, shit, he's actually in it. No wonder he
After leaving Doctor Who, Peter continued to appear occasionally on television. He had an appearance on Magnum P.I., which I wasn't aware of, and I'm sure our friend Norm probably knew and could have told me. The last thing, which, I mean, if you're a fan of modern Doctor Who, and you haven't watched the classic run of the show for whatever reason, right? Just not your bag. You didn't want to watch it. Or you're 12 and, don't have access to it or whatever. A lot of people of the revival era are still familiar with Peter Davison, the person, because of the interesting connection between Peter Davison and David Tennant. So, Peter had a daughter with his first wife. That daughter's name is Georgia Moffat. Georgia actually auditioned for Rose Tyler, which I didn't know, and I would have quite liked to see, for the Doctor Who revival. She also auditioned for a role in The Unicorn and the Wasp, which I also wasn't aware of, before finally being cast as Jenny, the titular character in the series 4 episode The Doctor's Daughter, which aired a few months after Peter Davison's appearance in Time Crash. She also voiced an an animated character in Dreamland. But it's okay. We have Peter Davison, the Doctor, has a daughter named Georgia Moffat. Georgia Moffat goes on to play the Doctor's daughter, Jenny, in an episode of Doctor Who, opposite a man by the name of David Tennant. Georgia Moffat then marries David Tennant. So, David Tennant married the Doctor's daughter, as in the actress who played the Doctor's daughter in the show, and also the woman who is the daughter of the Doctor, Peter Davison. And I love when Peter Davison and David Tennant do conventions together. Because you'll always see pictures popping up on Twitter or on whatever social media of like them like standing with signs, and like so you've got like Peter Davison sort of standing with a sign being like, you know, he's not that good, and then David was like, that's not what your daughter says. And I love it. So like I said, like if you're a fan of David Tennant's era on the show, and if you've never watched a single classic episode, you probably still know Peter Davison because of that weird connection.
And there's the very famous convention story of the fan asking, what's the greatest gift a Doctor Who fan has ever given you? He addressed it to Peter Davison, and someone else shouted out, a grandchild.
I think people have asked that of David as well. It's like, what's the greatest thing that one of the previous Doctors has given you? And he's like, my wife.
And when we, like, way back in our early days, when we appeared on the Half Measures podcast, Paul tried to trick us out with numbering in the quiz that they gave us.
Oh.
So, trivia galore, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I know, I said that really weird. So we now come into the character discussion component of the podcast, where we will talk about the Doctor, the companions, who this week I have selected Adric, Tegan, and Nyssa. Prominent characters who I put down initially Shardavan, Murgrave, and Ruther, and also villains of the Master.
Yep.
And for those of you that are new to the show, where I say I have selected is that because I do the story recaps, I kind of focus on the characters that I think are the major components. I send them on to Trish, and then we kind of go at the end, will we discuss this person? Will we not? Or will we just give them as a trivia only shout out?
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're happy.
It's also because Paddy does the recaps. Again, if you're only joining us now, Paddy does the recap every week because I don't have the patience to do that. Which means that he watches, like, you may have already started watching next week's episode, I'm not quite sure, but you start watching the episode a lot earlier than I do. I literally watch it in one run the night before. Whereas Paddy watches it several days before me because he has to write up his summary. So yeah, so we also do socials go first. So I go first. Yay. Okay, the Doctor.
Yes.
So far, I'm impressed. I have not seen a lot of Peter Davison as the Doctor. I've seen the 5 Doctors about 15 years ago at this point. And that's really about it, bar Time Crash and the 5-ish Doctors, which was mainly just Peter. I'm quite impressed. The only thing I didn't like, and this isn't a slight on Peter, nothing to do with Peter, was I think it took too long for the Doctor to become himself again. Like, it takes to like halfway through episode 3. Yeah. And I'm just like, that it was just too long. But what we got during that 2.5 episodes, like I mentioned it in the trivia, I loved all his little nods to the ones that came before. And Peter did them brilliantly. I particularly love his Hartnell because he does the little Hartnell giggle and I absolutely adore it. I think he has a really good dynamic with each of his companions, which is really good. One thing I didn't mention in trivia, actually, because remember there, is because they shot these out of order. Um, and that was apparently because Jonathan Turner wanted Peter to settle into the role for his first story so he wouldn't be nervous. It meant that the director had a bit of a problem because she had to sort of keep reminding the actors, you're not friends. You don't know him very well. He's newly regenerated. Which I think kind of the story struggled a bit. Like at some points he's a bit too pally, I think. Not only because he's just regenerated, but because, like, particularly for Tegan, he only met her last story. Do you know?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously he spends most of the story with Nissa and Tegan, so whatever. But overall, I really liked him. I think he gets the Doctor very well. I think, you know, anything I have an issue with is story related,
Mm-hmm.
not characterization related. But yeah, overall, I think for a first outing, I think he did very well. I think Peter fits the role very well. I'll be honest, I was a bit concerned because I didn't remember much about him. And Tom has really big shoes and big hair to fill.
Yeah.
And kudos to Peter. I think he did great on it. You know, like, I'm perfectly happy to keep watching. It's not like, oh my god, like, it's going to take me ages to get used to him. No, like, literally the end of the first episode, I'm like, this guy seems really fun. I'm looking forward to watching more of his stuff. How about you? What did you think of him?
So the one thing that I was always kind of like that sticks out from Peter Davison as a positive in my mind is that impression sequence of both, because he does Bill, he does Troughton, and he also does John.
Mm.
So not too shabby with the impressions. No, like yourself, I thought he did a really good job. The one thing that I thought was actually done quite well is, and I don't know whether it's intentional or not, but if you take a look at the moments when he's in crisis,
Mm.
you know, when he's uncertain, he acts very much his physical age. He acts
Yeah.
very young, uncertain, like he's kind of panicky about everything. But when he has his respite in the zero room and everything comes back to him, you can actually see the huge mental maturity from all his previous experiences, incarnations present. So he, like, Peter Davison does a really good job of playing two different ages of the Doctor here, both kind of newborn and also the experienced traveler that he is.
Mm.
And I think, and this is actually kind of kudos to the director, to Fiona as well, because you said that he brought her, she had to remind them, you're not friends at this stage.
Mm.
And I think that's kind of well exemplified by the interaction he has with all three of them. Because, like, you know, he only links up back with Adric at the very end. But once Adric is there, it's like, great, my friend is here. With Nissa, you can see the bond that they developed on Traken has carried over. And with Tegan, I think it's more exemplified at the very end, when, you know, he kind of, maybe a bit harshly, says, "Yeah, you didn't pilot the TARDIS. It was you didn't do as much as you think you did." And it's like a bit of a deep cut, like, you know, but I think it actually kind of fits in well with the whole "I don't really know who you are" type thing. So I think hats off to the director to bring that out of them again.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like because as I've said a couple of times before, my memories of Davison's era are kind of just, I felt it was bland. But going back now and redoing it for this, after watching Castrovalva again, I'm fully open to being as impressed as I was with his performance in this story.
Me too. He did also spend half the story in a box. I don't think there's much else we can say about him, but
yeah. Well, yeah, because like the story structure is very strange. It is, because, like, we talked before about was it Horns of Nymon? For one episode, the Doctor is literally just in the TARDIS trying to get out. He does nothing. Here we have 2 episodes of him stuck in the TARDIS, and he's going through a crisis, so we don't actually get a feel of who his Doctor is. So yeah, like it's kind of structure wise, it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, but yeah. But on to the companions.
Cool. So we've Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan. Who should we do first?
The order I would kind of push it would be Adric first, then Tegan, then Nyssa at the end.
Cool. So with Adric, I mean, there isn't a lot of him in this story. And the bits of him we do see are like mental projections of the actual Adric. It's weird. It's weird. I think Matthew Waterhouse, though, did a very good job of it with what he was given. I love his bit at the beginning where he's trying to talk to the security guards. He's like, hey, you wanted to find aliens. That's who we are. We're from up there. Clearly trying to blag it. Kind of carries on from last week or last time when he was like, he stole the bicycle and, whatever. He did have one of 2 bits of I know more than you with like Nyssa and Tegan. In like that first bit when his mental projection is in the TARDIS. But given the way the story works, I don't know if that was meant to be him actually meaning it or what.
Because I don't think that's the real Adric.
It's not.
Yeah. So I think it's just a projection of there's an awful lot about Adric's abilities here that will play into questions I have about other characters.
Yeah. I suppose the big thing about Adric here is that we find out that he can do that computation. The things that they were doing on Logopolis, Adric can do that. And to be honest, that really goes beyond he won a prize for maths. That goes really far beyond it. Like this implies, again, I mentioned it before, but this is a really sort of the Wesley Crusher, Traveler, level of intelligence, which I think actually works for his character. I have absolutely zero issue with it. The only thing is, and again, this is a writing thing, how would the Master know or care about that? Like the Master bigs up this big convoluted plan, unless the Master escaped Logopolis, sat around thinking about it for fucking ages, and then went back in time to pick up Adric and kind of going, oh wait, no, your man had a fairly big brain. I'm gonna go back and use big brain boy. Like that, but that to me is more of a writing problem.
Yeah, it's more of a story
than an Adric problem. I think, Adric trying to get through to people, trying to keep them safe. And what I love is that, and this is something that's true for the other 2 as well, he just wants to protect the Doctor. He's like, don't tell him I'm missing because it'll derail him. It'll, he won't heal as quickly or whatever, which is lovely. The question I have, which for Adric maybe isn't as big a problem, he adapted very quickly to the fact the Doctor regenerated. He just took that on the chin, which might be easier to explain for him than it will be for Nyssa and Tegan, who we'll get to in a minute.
Actually, just a quick question. The Adric that appears in the mirror, is that not a forced projection by the Master? Because the Master seems happy with the fact that no one will interfere with his plans. Because when Adric's...
Actually, no, you're right. Yeah, scrap all that, but so...
Yeah.
But in first, he is still worried about the Doctor in general.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because, this is the only kind of real point I have about Adric as Adric is that for the entirety of the thing he's trapped, he's still trying to resist the Master, and he's still trying to outmaneuver him. And, no... As we've seen before, he's got a shit poker face. So, the whole thing of, yeah, I'll join you. At which point the Master's like, you did that way too easy. No, I don't fucking trust you. You can stay in the web. So yeah, no, it's the bits of actual Adric that we see here are good. As you said, he's got the blag. trying to get the the guards tricked. And also, I'm just kind of wondering, like, the mental abilities or the intuitiveness, because it's like it almost seems like he's only distracting the guards so Tegan can hijack the ambulance, but he wouldn't have seen what Tegan has seen of the keys being in the ignition. So I'm just again kind of wondering, like, is he intuitive? Is he small bit psychic, or is it just, oh, that was lucky?
I think he just assumed the keys would be in it.
Okay, cool. But no, it was like I did like the bits where he's trying to resist the master, and then when he comes back and he's reunited with the doctor, and he's like, I can get us out of here because technically I designed the whole fucking place. So I thought that was cool. So while he's not hugely involved here, he's not weak in it either.
Yeah. The one who surprised me the most in this was Tegan.
Right.
Hold on to your butt, Paddy. I actually liked her in this.
Oh, interesting.
I thought she was really good. I loved the way she dealt with the situation on the TARDIS itself, the Event 1 thing. Even though the doctor was saying, like, yeah, you didn't actually pilot it or whatever, like, she took charge. She was like, cool, this is what we're doing. And that was something I quite liked. And it sort of reminded me of a First Doctor episode, was when the doctor was like, Tegan, you're the organizer, you're to keep everyone on track because you don't understand the science as well as the other two do. So you do that. Nyssa, you're tech, you're hands-on, you're the engineer, whatever. Adric, you're big brain boy, you're doing the maths, and you know how to fly the ship. Like, he gave them clear actions, and she took hers 100% seriously. Again, we need to remember this is her second outing. And she did so well just to be like, fuck it, no, I like this guy, he was good to me, he's a good guy, she's so protective of him. It's actually really good. Particularly at the end when she doesn't realise that the thing is full of books because she stepped out for a minute. And she goes up to Shardavan and she's like, he's my responsibility. I'm responsible. And you could say, like, oh, that's her air hostess training coming through or whatever. But if you compare the way she was this story versus last story, where it was a lot of, again, them trying to play into the air hostess side, but I don't think it played as well last story. But here you can clearly see she does well in a tricky situation. She leads, she, does recon, she pushes forward, whatever, very good. The only negative I have with the way she's written is she's too accepting of the regeneration for my book. Adric, like I said, it kind of makes sense. The doctor probably explained it before. Nyssa, well, this version brought her there, so maybe he explained. But also Nyssa is from a different time and place. She understands more about the universe. Tegan is a contemporary human. She is very accepting of the regeneration thing. And I think part of the way Janet played that, and I don't mean to fault Janet on this, but I think it goes back to what Fiona Cummings was saying, that she had played his friend for several stories.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see how Fiona would have struggled to pull her back to be like, you don't actually know this guy that well. Like, like if you compare her reaction to Ben and Polly, who lost their fucking mind.
But
particularly Ben, who was just like,
because Polly grew very. I think she'd have to go much quicker than Ben did, because Ben is still very sussy of him. I think until at least episode 4.
Yeah, and it could just be that she sees him as being weak. She watched him fall, like whatever. I just think they glossed over it a bit too much. I think it was a bit easy for her. But overall, like, credit where it's due, I actually really liked Tegan in this episode. How about you?
So, so like, I sometimes, depending on what our recording schedule is like, I might go back and rewatch the story, and I'm kind of glad I did, because prior to the us being unable to record last week, I had done like the first 3 episodes, and I was going to do the 4th one, but then we said, look, like, oh, we can't record this week. So then I just rewatched it again last night as I finished off the 4th episode. I'm glad that I did, because there were times where it was coming across that Tegan is trying to, I would say, unwarrantedly insert herself into a position of leadership in situations. And that's because it kind of comes across that way. As you said, like with the whole I am in charge of the doctor's care, and once they're on Castrovalva, also drink for every time that she looks pleased with herself for finding Castrovalva and saying its name. But once they kind of land on Castrovalva, she does really kind of take the lead on everything. And it is kind of a strange thing, because in the first 2 parts, she needs to be reassured by Nyssa. Like, Nyssa is the one that's kind of in charge. But as you pointed out, the doctor says, like, everyone has a part to play. And once you're in the situation that your part is up in, you're like, you obviously take the lead on it. Nyssa, because she was the tech head, was the perfect person to try and save the TARDIS and take all the actions and take the leadership there, as this thing is still in crisis mode. But once we're in the place where we're meant to be, Janet's, as you say, kind of a flight attendant, but also just, I think, her innate leadership, Tegan's innate leadership and her caring for people does tend to take over. And again, it kind of comes to a follow on from my comment last week, which is at times it comes across like she's being a bit abrupt, or I won't say obnoxious because it's the wrong word, but it's just being a small bit too in your face about stuff. But again, it's like this is a brand new situation for her, and she's just trying to keep herself grounded by doing what she can in the way that she knows that she can. Because she calls back to, like, she said that her dad once said that if was the greatest concept in the world. And so it's like I like, of the two of them, we'll talk about it there now in a moment. I thought I liked Nyssa more in this story than I liked Tegan, but at the same time that doesn't mean I dislike Tegan. I actually thought she did a really good job here, and it's a nice carry on from the previous story.
So then we have Nyssa. I liked Nyssa in this one. I had 2 major issues, and then I'll talk about the bits I did like. My 2 major issues were, I wanted more of a reaction out of her with the Master. We get a little reaction, but not as much as I wanted. Similar to Logopolis, I want more out of that. And if it wasn't for the way the characters had been set up, because we know that Adric understands all this stuff and he was learning from the 4th Doctor or whatever, I almost would have rather the Doctor kidnapped Nyssa, or that the Master kidnapped Nyssa rather than Adric. But it doesn't make sense in the story for it to have been Nyssa. It makes sense for it to have been Adric. So that kind of bothered me. I do want to see Nyssa have a proper fucking breakdown or freak out or like proper vent about that. The other thing I wasn't a big fan of is, for the most part, once they get to Castrovalva, the planet, she doesn't really have a whole lot to do. The duo of the 2 of them, I think, first of all, I think Nyssa and Tegan work great together as a duo. But I don't think, because like there was no technobiology books, or there was no, like, we don't see her researching, we don't see her, like, once they reach Castrovalva, she followed Tegan, and then she was kind of following Tegan's lead, and she did get that message from Adric / Master or whatever, but I don't think they gave her as much to do in Castrovalva itself as I would have liked. I would like to have seen more of her figuring things out. Or like, we had her, like, she was trying to fix the wheelchair, although why they couldn't just push the wheelchair without the motor, I don't quite understand. But But like, you know, we had her doing that, but after that, and up until the end, where she was in on the fact that the doctor wasn't in the thing, she doesn't really do as much in Castrovalva as I would have wanted. And you know, like I said, maybe that's just because, okay, she was taking lead in the TARDIS, now they've landed, Tegan taking front. I think it would have given if they gave her some more research to do or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that though, I really liked her. I think her scenes with Tegan are great. I'm loving that dynamic. I love how, like, she just does. Do you know what I mean? Like, when it came to like the issues with the TARDIS, when it came to all that kind of stuff, she just does. Do you know? She's like, no freaking out. The one thing that freaked her out the most is falling in a river.
Yeah.
Other than that, she was like, no, this is what needs to be done. I'm going to do it. I'm going to take it to panel. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Very methodical. Yep, this is what it is, and this is great. And I'm curious to see where they go with that. And with all three of them, the Doctor has now defined their roles. Are we going to see them growing in those roles, or like, you know, maintaining those roles as the episodes progress? Because I'm kind of looking forward to, like, we had the Fourth Doctor and Adric. I kind of want Nyssa and the Fifth Doctor to kind of be Science Bro or like Science Sibs or whatever. Do you know? I kind of want that dynamic.
Yeah.
You know, like we got a bit with Zoe, but not as much as I maybe would have wanted. I don't think it'll be quite on the level of John and Liz, as in Liz Shaw. But I want to see that, and I think it would look. I think it would work really well with these two, if we get to see that. How about you? What were your thoughts on this?
Pretty much the exact same as yours. Like, it's a mixed bag for me because I think Nyssa is really good in the start of this story. She's great. The fact that she's just, as you say, yeah, she just does it. She just, like, I have a task to do. I need to stop the ship from sinking, crashing, burning, whatever the case may be. So I loved the ad hoc repair mode that she's in, and her plus I love her interactions with the Doctor for those two episodes. You know, like, where she's helping him with the Zero Room, or he's telling her what to do in order to like do the manual override system, and it's great because we get to see her strong scientific acumen, which is fantastic. I love it. But as you say, yeah, once they do get to Castrovalva, she does kind of take a back seat to everything else, or to everyone else, which is a shame. And I wanted her to have a showdown with the Master, like, or a proper confrontation, because after everything that happened to her, she needs to have a small bit of catharsis. She needs to have that confrontation. Like, it's all well and kind of good, you know, that, oh, is the Master potentially dead now? Well, we know that he didn't get out of Castrovalva in time, but she didn't get to have that moment with him. She didn't get to have that. You're I want to look into the eyes of my father's killer type thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, there's two things with Nyssa. One, she didn't get to grieve her father's death, and two, his killer's going around wearing his face.
Yeah,
that's fucked up.
No.
And they haven't given her the strength or the frame of scope to cover that. And one thing Christopher Bidmead said in the behind the scenes was that Jonathan Turner wanted the companions to all be unique. He wanted them to be complex. He wanted them to be characters in their own right. And I think back to the encounter I told you about, the How with Janet Fielding, where she made a comment about how Tegan was different from the companions that came before. And I think I misunderstood her, because Jonathan Turner saw these characters that their primary function was to be the character, not to be the assistant. And that's kind of the way Christopher Bidmead described it, was that he wanted each of the characters to be able to grow and evolve, which is great, but which is a big departure from the companions that are there to support the Doctor, which is what we would have seen in previous iterations. So I do find myself wondering if all those years ago, when I got a giant chip on my shoulder over a comment made by Janet Fieldy at a convention, if that's actually more what she was referring to, that her character was intentionally written or presented to her as being, we want to do something different intentionally, as opposed to growth through circumstance. It's like intentional. So I'm going to be curious to see if that plays out for all of them, because apparently that's what John Nathan Turner wanted. So, but he also wanted it to be less campy, so
Yeah.
We'll have to see. Then we have our prominent characters. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have a whole lot to say about any of these people.
Okay.
I think for who they are and what they are, they're all very good. Again, Michael Sheard, just love him forever. Margrave and Ruther, I think, are probably the two that you'd sort of lump together more, because they're the most taken in by the thing around them. They live the moment, they live the experience. But they're both very kind, they're both very open-minded. Like, once you ask them the question, they're like, holy fuck, what is this? They challenge, like, poor Ruther just getting deleted from reality was horrendous. I think they both did really well. Shardavan, good red herring. You kind of think that he's doing weird stuff, whatever. Great red herring. Played it well. Love the way that they resolved that with him. It wasn't redemption by death. It was, confirming who he is and whatever. That was great. The three of them together, incredibly fucking sexist.
Oh yeah.
Like the way they treat Nyssa and Tegan the minute they arrive, like in private, they're a little bit nicer to them. Each of them is a little bit nicer, but in public, the three of them are like, "What you want? What you want? An audience? You want anything? But you're only women. Women do the caregiving. Women do the da da da." I wasn't a big fan of that, but for characters that were essentially a creation of Adric and the Master's minds together, they were interesting. I don't get the hats thing. The hats thing is weird.
Yeah, see, told you, funny hats.
Yeah, the funny hats thing is weird. I don't get it. But I think they were interesting characters. I felt bad for Ruther. I felt bad for Shardavan. Margrave, I love the fact that he wouldn't leave the rest of the people behind, because like in this reality, he's their doctor, he's their caregiver, and he wouldn't leave them behind, which is lovely. I don't really see them as individual characters all that much beyond that.
Okay.
But I thought they were good prominent characters for what they were.
Okay. Well, out of the three of them, I think Ruther is probably the least developed. All I can say is that he's a great example of make sure you bring your brother with you energy. But like
he also doesn't get a high hat. He gets a little careful he doesn't bang his head hat.
Yeah, like a scrum cap. But like he's like one of those court nobles you see in like just old Tudor based English movies, but like his sudden just erasure from existence is actually just very shocking to watch. Like it does take you back. Murgrave, for me, like in a slew of tragic sacrifices throughout this story, his one hits the most. His one hits the hardest for me, because I loved his interactions with everyone, especially the Doctor. When they were alone, and he's got that, as you said, he's got that soft voice, he's like very timid and mild mannered way about him, and it's the exact same as he was as Lawrence in Pyramids of Mars. Like that sort of like eager to learn person. But despite that, despite being so mild mannered and soft, he performs the ultimate sacrifice in trying to prevent the Master from escaping. And like it's it's not that he's injured or anything like that. It's like he actively tries to push the Doctor away whilst he goes back to hold off the Master.
Yeah.
Shardavan, I think, is probably the most interesting of them because of, as you said, like the red herring slow reveal of his true nature. I thought that was done quite well. Because like throughout it, you're like, is he some sort of dark manifestation of the Master within Castrovalva? But like his whole demeanor, it is actually a facade, so that he can kind of, his skepticism about his surroundings goes unnoticed. People just think he's like a sour elitist, so that way they leave him alone to be able to conduct his own investigations. The one question I would ask though about Shardavan specifically, is Shardavan a failsafe created by Adric, or did Shardavan gain his own sentience towards his existence?
I like the first option.
Yeah.
I like the idea that what we saw in the show as like someone being puppeted by the Master or whatever, even like, you know, he's got dark hair and the goatee and whatever. I do like the idea that he was Adric's creation.
Because the Master said very early on that Adric's projections were able to like be independent of like whatever direction that they were given. So I think that Adric, I kind of go with the first option is that Adric created Shardavan with like a fail-safe measure, which is question your surroundings.
Yeah, I like that. Even if that's not the case, I like that headcanon. And
yeah,
I want to go with it.
Because it kind of reminds me of, I know you didn't read it, but comics years ago, House of M, where Scarlet Witch rewrites reality. But she, from what I remember, she actually creates an entire person that is a failsafe, that is able to remember the previous world and unlock everyone else's memories of the previous world. Also, when I was writing the recap, I said that, he prepares to swing from a chandelier. Chandelier by Sia came into my head. So I had that in my head while I watched that scene. But yeah, no, like, so I think Shardavan was the most interesting character. Murgrave was the most tragic of them.
And poor Ruther was fucked.
Yeah, poor Ruther is just like, it's like, no, like someone just shot the comic relief character.
And then we have the Master himself. I have now formed my opinion on Anthony Ainley's Master.
Go for it.
So Roger Delgado's Master, we had sort of agreed was big ideas, manic crazy person, but constantly relied on other people who ultimately stabbed him in the back.
And never learned his lesson.
No. Anthony Ainley's Master, insane. I think because like, Delgado was a bit of a gentleman. Ainley is just fucking mental.
Yeah.
High intelligence, low wisdom.
Yep.
He comes up with the most convoluted, insane, Rube Goldberg machine-like plans. But he still tries to open a box you can't open with a crowbar.
Yeah.
He can see 50 steps ahead, but not one.
Yeah. He can see steps 2 to 50, but not step 1.
But not step 1. Or he sees step 1 and doesn't see the string before it. So, like, I think he's really fun to watch. I love his interactions. People actually really liked his interactions with Adric. I thought they were really good. But that man needs to sort of, like we sort of said it last week, he thinks he's the most intelligent person around, and so he cannot possibly conceive that someone would be more intelligent than him. And the fact that in this, the person more intelligent than him is really Adric, which I like. It's Adric, the Doctor, and Nyssa, really, because Tegan doesn't really have much to do in that last bit, which is fine. Like, why would she? But yeah, so I like him. I think he's interesting. I think this is the full display, though, of batshit crazy, of doing all of this just to fuck with the Doctor. That's all it's for.
Mm-hmm.
Castrovalva was made up. It had no power in and of itself. He could have used Adric to create fucking anything, and he
Yeah.
created a fucking death trap for the Doctor. Why? Because it'd be fucking fun. That's why. I'm liking it. It's really going towards the modern Master that we're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the way Anthony Ainley plays it. How about you?
So yeah, sorry, just another quick thing there, and I just remembered about Charlemagne. The fact that because he's the only person over a certain height in Castrovalva, he's the only man that doesn't get caught up in the ritual hunt. So therefore, he's free of that loop as well. So yeah, leaning more towards my thing of Adric creating him as a failsafe. So yeah, like a trap within a trap, interesting. But the fact that the secondary trap was such huge overkill on your part, like sending the Doctor back to the dawn of creation, and to get engulfed in the inferno that is the Big Bang. Yeah, that's a fucking rock solid thing. But why not have it like? Why not just ensure that that's the thing that kills him? Like have your facsimile Adric create like essentially Deep Space Nine, the TARDIS, you know? They have fail safes for fail safes for fail safes, rather than coming up with this big, huge, elaborate fucking scheme that you were requiring on one of the Doctor's companions to create. And even after you point out the fact that he can create manifestations that work independently of the grand design. So yeah, like just again a bit. I think it's because he loves dressing up.
Me too.
I think it's because he loves being and this pun is intentional, master of disguise. But it actually in that capacity, Anthony Ainley is a fucking talented actor.
Oh, he is.
He's amazing because, like watching him as, oh Christ, I need to fucking get his name. Tremas. Watching him as Tremas was amazing. Watching him as the master, like, you know, with that lower jutting fucking row of teeth, because he's also got incredibly sharp canines as well, which also kind of adds an element of fucking eeriness to him. But then seeing him as the Portreeve and like being kind of creepy as well, because you notice at points that he's like pawing at the Doctor, and it's like this weird, like, you know, you're like spider to the fly, you're in my parlor type thing, you know. But yeah, again, it's just like so much fucking overkill. And like, oh, I still say like that the smartest incarnation of, I think, of the Master that we've seen was probably the one back in the Deadly Assassin. And like, or even like that one, and if it's potentially the same person, the one at the start of the Keeper of Traken. Because it's like you're patient, you're playing the long game, you're being fucking smart about it. Why is it that when you get a fully functioning, good-looking body, that you just actually start acting like a fucking idiot again? So yeah, I did like his kind of back and forth with Adric, because it reminded me a small bit of Delgado and Joe. Because you know the way that he would sometimes refer to her, you know, he would Miss Grant, and I think the one that kind of leaps out to me was the Timekeeper, or sorry, the Time Monster, where I thought the Master and Joe had a really good interaction there, and also his last story, Frontier in Space. So yeah, you kind of get that element here with Adric and the Master. But again, I would have loved to have seen him with Nyssa, like properly with Nyssa, you know?
Yeah, I think they missed a beat on that, and
yeah,
I get it. The TARDIS was a bit crowded. You know, like I said, I get that, but at the same time, I think it was a missed opportunity. I think there's so much that could have been done with that. That would have been so good. Do you know?
Oh yeah, no,
I think
hugely.
Anthony would have played really well opposite her as
Mhm.
well. Like we saw that even like the little bit we got in Legopolis,
Yeah.
we saw that there was a good dynamic between the two of them. But again, they already have 3 companions. There's a lot going on. You know, it's how much can you fit in really? Do you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I don't know if you have the Blu-ray of this. I don't think you do. Do you?
No, not yet.
But in that making of documentary, Mark actually shows the others that after he had, been asked to come back as the Master of, Anthony Ainley actually sent John Nathan Turner a letter, basically saying, "Thank you so much. I'm just having so much fun, and thank you for bringing me back. I love playing this character," and it's just like I have to see if I can find the clip for you on YouTube, Paddy. Maybe you can find it, but it is so sweet that clearly Anthony loved playing this character. Like he clearly thought it was fabulous. But he sent Johnny to Turner a letter, like a physical fucking letter saying, Thanks for having me back. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm having so much fun." Like, that's great. That's a lovely thing to hear, particularly when you're playing the bad guy. Do you know?
Yeah.
I think it's really lovely.
So we now come to the overall section of the podcast where we each give our ratings of the story out of 5. So Trish, because socials go first, tell me your thoughts.
I have mixed thoughts on this story. First of all, that pre-credit scene, because I hit play all episodes and it was just there. It kind of took me a bit by surprise. I was just like, okay, this is new. Okay, I'll do the bits I didn't like first, and I'll circle back to it. I think the pacing on this story was seriously fucked. They spend so long in the TARDIS, and then so long walking to Castrovalva. There are so many scenes, and of course, the grounds of this place where they filmed it are beautiful. The scenery is lovely, but there are so many scenes of Nyssa and Tegan just walking. We can't get up the cliff this way. We'll try go up the cliff that way. We'll keep climbing this way. We'll keep like, just fucking get to Castrovalva already. Like, it took so long. So I wasn't a big fan of that. I thought it took way too long, which meant that Peter didn't have a lot to do because it was taking so long. And yeah, it meant that we got to have, like I said, I loved Tegan during those sequences. I thought she was great. I loved the dynamic with Nyssa, because the way Nyssa as well is just like, bitch, what the fuck are we doing? Like, what is this? I don't think you know where we're going, but I'll keep following you anyway, but I'm convinced you're fucking making shit up. I think the pacing could have been better. The other thing as well is when we get to the breakdown of what's actually happened, you've got Adric in the web. He never actually returned to the TARDIS. It was a projection from the web. And then everything that comes after that, like, I kind of felt like I needed to do, like, that episode was from Parks and Rec, where every man has, like, the board with all the string. Or not from Parks and Rec, Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, it's Always Sunny.
I'm just like, dude, what are you on about? What are you on about? Like, Castrovalva is a creation. It was created by the Master, but it wasn't actually created by the Master. It was created by Adric. How much was Adric brainwashed versus how much was he just forced to do something? Because that's another thing that I never quite fully got. Because at one point, the Master's like, join me and together we shall rule the galaxy, whatever. And Adric is like, nah, fuck off. Like, I never help you, but clearly he did because he built Castrovalva. So how much is Adric just a battery? How much is he brainwashed into doing things he doesn't want to do? And how much is he actually in control? we didn't really know. And that, for me, it kind of reduced my enjoyment of the story as a whole a little bit. I found the whole thing really interesting, but the writing was a bit bloated in some areas and then boring as sin in others. It was just like this weird thing. What I did like, though, I loved all of our companions. I thought they each had some standout moments. I thought, like I said, I was massively surprised with Tegan. I'm curious to see how Tegan progresses as a character because, like I said, I went in with a slightly negative opinion without having ever really watched her. So I'm glad that I was wrong, or at least not 100% right on that. I really like I'm really liking the Nissa and Tegan dynamic. Now I'm trying to remember if, and I'm fully feeling this, I think Nissa and Tegan is a popular ship.
Oh, it is a popular ship.
I can see why.
Yeah.
One proper story in with the two of them, I can see why. And I'm curious to see how that friendship, because obviously they don't have a romantic relationship on screen, but I'm curious to see how that friendship develops. And Peter Davison, before I go to Peter, Anthony, fucking class act. That man chews scenery in the best possible way and give him more of it to chew. I think it's fucking brilliant. Yeah. Peter, though, for his first story out the door, I think he did very well. I think I kind of get what John Nathan Turner was trying to do by like getting rid of the nerves in maybe a different episode. I'm curious when we get to what his actual first episode is. I'm very curious as to what his performance would be like in that. But I think this Doctor is warm and kind, but still intelligent, and still just that little bit of bracing. I am the all-powerful Time Lord. There's just, like I said, there's just that little bit of that still in there with his comments to Tegan at the end.
Like, and plus as well, the fucker made them jog back to the TARDIS, and he was calling the time as he was doing it.
Yeah, no, I think he did really well. Like I said, massive kudos to Peter Davison. I think it was a great start, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of this TARDIS team. So for me, what let this story down was kind of the story itself. And like I said, Chardavan, Murgrave, and Ruther, well, I thought they were interesting as a concept, and like I love Michael Shute and everything. It took us so long to get to Castrovalva. We didn't get as much of them as I would have liked. So I gave it 3.5. I was going to give it a 4, but then to be honest, that pacing thing really fucking bothered me. So 3.5. How about you?
So first thing I want to get out there is I think the direction of this story, or at least the cinematography of the story, is actually quite good. I think there's some beautiful shots in here. But the one that sticks in my mind, and it's kind of haunting, is at the very end when you hear like the air filled with screams, and you've got Murgrave trying to hold the Master back, while from behind him, in a sort of almost like vampire, because of the clothing, like this weird vampire-esque mob, the other Castrovalvans trying to pull the Master back in as well. Like he's swamped, and it's just like that shot of him trying to fend them off, and almost like a weird reverse Antichrist type thing, because he's all in white as well, with the jet black hair and the beard, and it's like this, like, my creations are trying to kill me type thing. Like that's a visual that's just burned into my head now. But so things I liked: the man himself, the Doctor, not a bad introduction at all, really good. And Peter Davison did a really good job of showing the age and wisdom behind the eyes, I think, here. Because like at the very end, it's like I can see Tom and John and Pat and Bill in here. I can see the accumulation of that knowledge and those performances here in that young face. So I thought that was good. And as I said, I liked his like kind of nervous newborn performance when he was going through like the uncertainty and jittery side of things, and like his huge adrenaline surge. I like that. It was great seeing a good strong performance from Nyssa. It was good seeing a continuation of an interesting character development from Tegan's side of things. Adric, the few moments we had with him were, good. As I said, I think I liked the performances of the three lads, and I liked Murgrave's character and the sacrifice behind it, and Shardavan's whole thing is very interesting to me. But where it kind of falls down is, again, it kind of falls down in two parts for me. One is the story itself is all right, like as you said, like we don't get to Castrovalva until the third episode, and we still have a doctor. To be honest with you, I didn't mind the doctor not being the doctor, kind of like finding himself. I enjoyed that arc of it, but everything that's going on isn't super engaging. It's not gripping. Like I was perfectly content to leave this as one episode a day, and as well, another big thing for me was that if you have Adric kidnapped and you have two companions, you missed a huge opportunity here with Nyssa and the Master. Huge fucking thing. Because this could have been the payoff to that storyline, so I think that was that really kind of, it soured it a small bit for me, I'm not going to lie. So between that and an all right story, I've also given it a 3.5.
Okay. Not a bad start by any stretch.
No, it's not. And I think it is the lowest of the at least definitely the regeneration stories that we've seen.
Yeah, so if we have a look back, if we just look at the last 3 seasons, so season 18, season 17, season 16, like season 18 started with like a 1.63 average. That was the Leisure Hive. Season 17, Destiny of the Daleks, started with a 1. So we're back on that upswing, which is great to see. Before that was Rybos, which was a 4, which was brilliant.
Yeah.
If we go back to regeneration stories, Robot was like a 4.88 on average across the two of us. I gave it a 5. Robot was amazing. Then we have Spearhead, also really high, up in that over 4.5 mark. And then I always forget it isn't the opening story, Power of the Daleks. Yeah, so it is the first opener to be less than a 4. But it's not less than a 4 by much.
Unless you count An Unearthly Child, which is the introduction.
Well, yeah, but that wasn't a regeneration story.
Yeah.
But it wasn't less than a 4 by much.
No.
So, like, the story is by no means bad. I think there's just things we both would have liked to have seen it do that it could have done if it was structured a little bit better.
Yes.
Which, this happens. Like I said, I'm very curious to see how the season goes.
Peter Davison has done he's done a great job here, that I'm curious to see what I'm curious to see where his Doctor grows and how he grows, and I'm also very interested to see how they'll work a 4-person TARDIS.
That I'm really curious about. I'm also really curious about of all the characters that of the 4 characters we have in our TARDIS at the moment. I'm curious about how each of them is going to progress.
Yeah.
Peter has a really strong out the gap performance. I'm curious to see how that's going to progress. Tegan, like I said, she was a bit annoying last week. Not terrible, but a bit annoying. Really liked her this week. Thought she was really good. Thought she fit, her job function quite well. Curious to see how that progresses. The 2 characters I'm most curious about, though, are Nyssa and Adric for completely different reasons. Adric I'm curious about because, like I said, you look online and a lot of people seem to not like Adric. And other than the odd case of how do you write a young man who's intelligent knowing he's intelligent without him coming across as like, an upstart, pain in the hole. I haven't had any issue with Adric. I've quite liked him as a character. I think Matthew Waterhouse is playing him really well. He sort of has like a sort of cute naivety to him in some ways, well, he's also trying to be, he's like a little kid who's trying to play at being an adult because he has to. So I'm curious how that's going to progress, because I do know a big spoiler about Adric. So I'm curious as to how that's going to progress to that point. But the other one I'm really curious about is Nyssa. In a 3-companion TARDIS, where you have the contemporary human, future space boy, and then you've Nyssa in the middle, who's a woman. So there's certain things that come with that in a show in the 80s. She's young. She's intelligent. She's technologically advanced. She's science brain. I don't want to see her getting lost between Adric and Tegan. And just that she gets the leftovers of what's left from between the two of them.
Yeah.
I don't think we saw that this story. Like I said, she didn't do as much as I would have liked, but what she did was really good. But I'm curious, when you have the 3 of them, I'm kind of concerned that she's the one that would get the short shrift, because she sort of is the combination of the 2 other characters.
I'm just trying to check something there now, so give me a sec. Okay. Yeah, no, I was just trying to see where she might have the most impact, and based on that spoiler that you had said. So yeah, no, it'll definitely be interesting to see.
Yeah, but it is the dawn of a new day. It is a new Doctor, new generation for Doctor Who, a continuation of shite Trish hasn't seen before, and Paddy's maybe only seen once. So we'll see how it goes. Next week...
Trish means shite in the Irish way, not that the content itself is shite.
No,
it's just
shite I haven't seen before.
Also, I was fully expecting you to say it's a dawn of a brand new day, Vissen. I was like, thank God you didn't say it.
My brain doesn't work that well. Next week, though, is 4 to Doomsday.
Yes.
So we will see how our TARDIS crew gets on then. Until then, let us know your thoughts. What do you think of Peter? What did you think of Tom? Now that we've moved on to a new Doctor, hit us up on those socials, and yeah, we will talk to you next time. Bye. Bye.